Oh, welcome to another one of my ukulele music theory tutorials. This is another set of related chords. I'll be looking at how a major chord is related to a minor chord, a sus2, and a sus4. And I'll also look at a diminished seventh chord, which they're a little bit related in the same way. So to start with, we know a major chord takes its notes from the 8 notes of the major scale, and it uses the 1, the 3, and the 5. A minor chord uses the 1, a flattened third, and the 5. And a sus2 chord, as you might guess, uses the 1, a 2, and a 5. On the other side, a sus4 chord uses the 1, the 4, and the 5. So you can see how all the chords are pretty closely related. They all have the 1 and the 5 remaining constant, and it's only this middle note that varies, all just one semitone apart from each other. And then if we look at a diminished seventh chord, it's a bit different. It has the 1, a flattened third, a flattened fifth, and a sixth. But you can see it kind of continues the pattern by using the next note in the middle, one up from the sus4. So let's look at some chord shapes on some of our ukulele fretboard. The open strings G, C, E, A. And I'll start with a major chord, which looks like this. And that changes the notes to an A C sharp, an E, and another A. Now both the A's are the same, and that's our root note, the 1. The C sharp is the third, and the E is the fifth. So it's this third that we're going to modify to get all the other chords. If we take this major shape and want to make it into a minor, A minor, we need to flatten this third to the open string, making it a C note. And then taking this minor shape, if we want a sus2, we're going to want to flatten this C again to a B. Now we can't make the open C any lower, so the best way to get a B note is on this A string here, and then we need to lose the C note and change it to either an A or an E. Now we could take it to an E here, but this isn't really the easiest shape to play, and I often cheat this one by playing a normal A chord with this top B note. It's not really an A sus2, it's an A add 9, but it's going to sound close enough in most cases, and it's much easier to play. Or a different way to get a proper A sus2 would be to take this A shape and slide these notes up here to the 4th fret to get the A, the E, and the B notes for an A sus2. If we go back to our major shape and want to make an A sus4, we'll slide this third up to make the 4th, which will be a D note. And then to make an A diminished 7th, we need to find the root note, A. Now this A falls on the 4th string, the G string. Now that's an even numbered string, so I'm going to bar the neck at this point on the root. And then I'll put 2 fingers on the odd strings, the 1st and the 3rd, or the A string and the C string, making this shape. And the notes are A, D sharp, F sharp, and C. And you can see we've taken that middle note and sharpened it again. It's steadily climbed from a B to a C sharp to a D and to a D sharp to make all of these chords. Now if we look at bar chords, this is an A-shaped major bar chord. You could play lots of chords up the neck like B flat, B, C, D flat, D, etc. The 2 outside strings are the root note, and this note is the 3rd. So if we take this shape and we want to make it minor, we just flatten this note, or we lift our finger up, leaving the bar and the bottom root note. To take this minor shape and make it a sus2, we want to flatten that pink note again. But this is not the easiest shape to play, but notice that our top and bottom strings are the same, so we only need one of them, and I would play this as a 3-string chord, muting the bottom string. You could play the top 2 frets with one finger, partial bar, and this fret could also be a partial bar for our sus2 chord shape. So now on the other side, we'll take our major shape and make it into a sus4 by sharpening this pink note. And then to make a diminished 7th from our major, we notice where the root note is, and because it's an even numbered string, that's where we make our bar fret, and then finger the 2 odd strings 1 fret higher. And we see our middle note here has been steadily climbing on the 3rd string. We could have also chosen this top string as our root note, and because it's an odd numbered string, we would hold the 2 odd strings here on the 1st and 3rd strings, and then bar the next fret down for the even strings. And our pink note, now a flattened 5th, is on a different string. They're both the same chord. And now let's look at what changes we'll make to a C major chord. And this is our open C position, the notes G, C, E, and C. 2 root notes, an octave apart. The E is the 3rd, and the G is the 5th. So this note is the one that we will be changing. To go from this C to a C minor, this one's a bit tricky because they're all open strings. We can't just go down a fret. We want to make this E into a D sharp. So the best D sharp will be to take this C string and go up to the 3rd fret. And then we need to lose the E and make it either a G or a C. So we can slide the E string up to the 3rd fret as well, making G, D sharp, G, and C. And you might like to bar this with one finger across the top 3 strings. To make this C minor shape into a C sus2, we'll flatten that D sharp to become a D. And you might find it easier to bar both these frets as well. On the other side, a C becomes a C sus4 by sharpening that E note, which is easy, making it an F. For C diminished 7th, we find the root note C. Here it's on string number 1, so we'll fret both of the odd strings here and place a bar on the next fret down for the even strings. We get an A, a D sharp, an F sharp, and C, and the F sharp is our floating note. For bar chords, this C-shaped bar chord can be used for C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, etc. up the neck, and the roots are on these 2 strings. And this note will be our floating 3rd note. To get the minor, we mark our root note on the top string and bar the top 3 strings there. If you want to play the 4th string, you'd play it here. And this now essentially looks like an A minor chord shape turned into a bar. Our floating note is this one here. So for the sus2, we'll take these 3 minor chord notes and flatten the floating note to a 2. And you can bar these like we did before. And don't play the bottom string. Or you could bar this just like we were barring the major chord on the same fret. And you'll see it now looks similar to the major chord shape. And then use your 3rd and 4th finger to make these partial bars from the major shape to get the sus2 shape. For the sus4, we'll hold our major shape and just sharpen this second string to get the fourth. And then for the diminished seventh, you can use this top root note to make the shape. Our floating note here on the second string. Or you could use this low root note on the third string and make the diminished seventh shape around that. And the floating note will be this one on the fourth string. So these are both the same chord as well. Every diminished seventh chord just repeats itself every 3 frets. It'll be the same notes, just in a different order. So next, let's look at the G shape, which we know looks like this, making the notes G, D, G, and B. 2 root notes, both the same pitch this time. The B is the third and the D is the fifth. So the B note will be our floating note. It's very easy to make a G shape into a G minor. We flatten that note to make a B flat. To make this into a G sus2, we flatten it again to an open A. And from the major shape to a G sus4, we sharpen that third to a C. And the G diminished seventh could be played with this open G as the root. Now it's on the even fourth string, so we could treat the whole nut as if it's our bar and just fret the 2 odd strings, giving us G, C sharp, E, and A sharp. The C sharp is the sharpened floating note. Or, if we'd chosen the other G as our root note, it's also on an even string, so that's our bar, and we'd fret here, making a B flat, E, G, and C sharp. And now the C sharp is on the top string. So you've got the option of an open shape or a bar shape like all the others. Our major G shape bar chord is really an F-shaped bar. The root here and 2 floating notes, both thirds. For the minor, we want to flatten these thirds, and now it's no longer a bar shape. This is a bit awkward to play, but the 2 outside strings are the same note, so we could choose which one to play and just leave the other one out altogether. If we only play the top 3 strings, it looks like an open G minor, or if we only play the bottom 3 strings, it looks like an open F sharp minor. These are both the same chord in this position, so you can choose which 3 strings suit you. Or if you played the bottom F sharp minor shape, you could place your pinky on this note above and play a 4-string shape. Now, if I draw this bar across here, you can see that the other fingers look like an open F minor shape, except it's a bit impossible to actually play this as a bar. Now this pattern turns into a sus2 shape. It needs us to flatten the floating note, and this shape can be played as a bar. In fact, you'll notice this sus2 shape is exactly the same as our C-shaped sus4 chord. And we'll take the major shape again to make a sus4 chord. We're going to sharpen those thirds. And it's a bit of a stretch to play that bottom string note, and we don't actually need it because it's doubled on the top string. So this can be a 3-string chord played like this with 2 partial bars. Or you could add this root note below and change the position of your index finger bar, and you can see that this sus4 chord is exactly the same as our C-shaped sus2 chord shape we played before. And that's because every sus2 is actually the same notes as a different sus4 chord, and they all pair up. For the diminished seventh, find the root note. If it's on strings 2 or 4, then it's part of the bar, and the individual fingers go on strings 1 and 3. The floating note in this case is on the top string note. And you can get the same chord 3 frets apart. The root will be on a different string, but you form it the same way. All the notes are just rotated in a different order. So as I said, these bar chords are really just based on an F shape, so there's no real difference between G and F, but we'll quickly look at the open F shape. So here's the fingering we know. The notes become A, C, F, and A. F is the root, two A's to choose from as the third, and C is the fifth. So we'll need to change both these notes as floater notes. It's worth remembering you can also play an F with your finger on the C note here, and then there's only one floater to worry about. Our F shape becomes an F minor by flattening this bottom string to A flat and changing this top string to the C. And this shape becomes F sus2 by flattening it again to a G. Now this is another sus chord I sometimes cheat by leaving out the C. It's not quite correct, but it sounds pretty close, and it just means lifting your bottom finger off a regular open F. But if you were finger picking, you'd want the top C, so there's no A note in the chord. And we take the F shape and make it F sus4 by sharpening the two outer strings, getting B flat, C, F, and B flat. But this is also one that I reckon you can cheat by playing a regular F and only adding the top B flat. Now for both these last chords, you should try to emphasize your strumming on the notes that should be there and minimize the one that shouldn't, either the top three or the bottom three strings. But really, this is the proper shape. And for the F diminished seventh, the same pattern we know. Find the root note F, here it'll be in the bar, and fill out the other strings. A flat, D, F, and B. And a B is your sharpened floating note. And finally, just looking at the way that sus chords are related, a C-shaped bar chord becomes a sus4 by moving this note, and an F-shaped bar chord, here you can see it's with the optional top string note, becomes a sus2 by flattening this note 2 frets. And they are now exactly the same shape. If you had a C-shaped bar chord that became a sus2, you'd drop this finger down over 3 frets and this one over 2. And if you had a G-shaped bar chord, this is just a 3-string version, you'd make it a sus4 by sharpening this top string. And then you'll see it's the same thing. And you could also change this bar finger position and the two chords are now identical. And these are just like an A-shaped bar chord, a few frets up, which we made into a sus2 by only playing the top 3 strings and flattening the third by 2 frets. And they're all interrelated. So we've covered a lot here in detail, but the basic principle is actually pretty easy. All the first 4 chords are the same root note with the 5th, and we just change the floating middle note to make a sus2, a minor, a major, or a sus4. And the diminished chord is slightly related. It's still a weird one that confuses a lot of people, but you can see in all the examples that it's always exactly the same simple shape, and if you can figure out where the root note is, you'll know where to play it. Thanks for following along in this tutorial. I hope it's been helpful. Have a look at the other one I did, showing how 6th, 7th, major 7ths, and augmented chords all have a similar relationship. Plus I have a handful of other lessons that I hope you might find useful. Thanks a lot. See you next time.